The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey, coming to you cordless, everybody. It's Tuesday night, September 24th, 2024, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peterson Night. I am Jim Peters, episode number 159. If you're keeping score at home, what do we got tonight? Tonight, you're calling in. That's what we got. We don't have any guests. This is our first show of the week. We usually do that. I just realized I put down in all the descriptions online that it was Phone Fun Monday, but it's Tuesday. What am I thinking? And it never occurred to me literally to like 5 seconds before we went on here. It's Tuesday. It's for Phone Fun Tuesday. So, yeah, we don't have a guest tonight. We're taking tomorrow night off. There's reasons for this. I'll get to that for a second. We're coming back on Thursday. I don't know if we have a guest on Thursday night or not. I don't know. We're coming back on Monday next week, and Tuesday is the vice presidential debate, and we're going to have our month in review panel for that, and we're going to start as soon as the debate's done, as we've done with all the previous debates. But after that, we're taking a whole week off, and here's the reason: we're rejiggering the show. It's going to be something different when we come back. Specifically, it's been a video show so far, and we've had a radio feed on Blog Talk Radio. We're switching it to the opposite. It's going to be a radio show with a video feed, which means we're dropping the green screen background, we're dropping all the graphic intros, all that sort of stuff. It's going to be primarily a radio show. There's a reason we're doing this, and I can't tell you what it is yet, but there is. Also, the other things we're taking off on Wednesday. We're going to be off on Wednesday, October 2nd, and we're coming back on Wednesday, October 9th, right? At a new time, and that's going to be 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. 2 hours earlier than we'll be doing it. That's going to be permanent. So we might change the time yet again too, but that's what it's going to be for the time being when we come back, and it's going to be it has been largely a video interview show, but it's going to be primarily an interview show after that. So I have to tell you, I'm looking forward to it. I had a hard time booking some guests this week, and also I had got to admit I wasn't that into it because I basically want to get guests booked up, lined up for when we come back and in our second incarnation. So that's what we got going on here. So we still have a sponsor though. Our sponsor is Kong News, and here's the front page of Kong News in real time. I didn't get a chance to look over these stories very much. I don't know what's going on here, but let me explain to you what Kong News is. It's a news aggregator, but it's unlike any other news aggregator you've ever seen on the web. It is. Here's the reason. Okay, most news aggregators will take news from a whole bunch of different outlets and they'll group them together, like the top stories from Amazon, or no, I'm sorry, the top stories from Fox News, the top stories from like Breitbart, a Gateway Pundit, all that stuff. They put them all together. Konk doesn't do that. It's an automated service, and in this case, that's a good thing. Usually it isn't, but it is in this case. Every 3 hours, the servers of Konk News go out to about 75, 77 different news organizations and grab their top stories, anything they published in the previous 3 hours, right? They bring all that stuff back, and then the servers lay out those stories on the front page in a verse chronological. What did I almost say? Chronological story, chronological order. So, and what happens is that the news stories are at the top, but they're all mixed together. So you might have a story from like for example, I think I can't tell. I think the story at the top of the front page we're looking at right now, I think, is from National Review. So you can have a story from National Review right next to a story from Red State, right next to a story from Breitbart. They're all mixed together. And as far as I know, Calling News is the only single news aggregator news service that does this. And the upside to this, or the result, is that it's pretty much like more like a traditional newspaper than any other news aggregator you'll find. So here you'll see, by the way, that's of course my picture on the top right, and that's because they sponsor the show. It's very nice of them. They put me up there. Um, the stories, the headlines to these stories are not rewritten. The headlines from the articles. The pictures are from the articles. And if you click through, you don't go to a interstitial page, you don't go to an ad, you don't go to the front page of the website, you go directly to that article. And most of these news sources are not behind paywalls. And you will rarely, some of the news sources for Calling News they will give you a certain amount of free stories a month. They'll do that. So you might occasionally run into a story you won't be able to read, but not often, not very often at all. They had to make, and when I say they, I used to work there. I was I was a very proud former employee of this place. Uh, they had to make, they have to make editorial decisions on how much of that they're going to allow. But it's not like, the Wall Street Journal, the entire paper, besides the front page, is behind a paywall. Also, the Epoch Times, same thing. It's all behind a paywall. So there's no links to anything like that because you can't read it unless you pay. And Calling News assumes you haven't. So, at any rate, I can't tell you how good a news source this is because you're going to get 75 different sources, and a lot of times you'll get a lot of articles about the same subject, literally right next to each other, but they're from different perspectives. So it's fantastic. I use this all the time. I use this to plan out the show. If you're a news junkie, you can't go wrong with this. And this is the most important thing. It's completely free. You don't have to register. You don't have to log in. You don't have to subscribe. None of that crap. You just go there. It's at conk.com, conk.com, or as you'll see at the very top of the page, or conk.news, conk.news. Either one works. So check that out if you haven't already. And you should, seriously. It's a fantastic resource. It's terrific. Okay, so let's talk about the election. I think we're 45 days away today, if I'm right. Um, This is really interesting. It's interesting. Well, I don't have to tell you it's interesting. I mean, like, my boyfriend, as Jeff Meyer from Calling News likes to point out, my boyfriend Bill O'Reilly has pointed out there's an election, presidential election, unprecedented in American history, and all the stuff that's happened. I mean, we have it. The Republicans are running against a Democratic challenger who is not actually nominated or elected by primary, and it happened very quickly. I mean, the front runner was quickly replaced. Many people would say unfairly. I mean, he is the man is not thinking straight anymore. But still, that's beside the point. He did win 14 million votes in a primary, and they basically just got rid of him. Excuse me, it was as close to a coup as you'll find in American politics. So under all those circumstances, you wonder, well, okay, what's happening here? If you look at the polls, and especially the aggregate polls, then there's the Real Clear Politics average, which takes I think 39 or 41 different polls and averages them all together. The race is virtually tied, and you have different outlets telling you different things. I mean, the NBC News came out with a poll this last weekend that said that Harris was up 4 or 5 points over Trump. Now here's something they didn't tell you about that poll, and this is the part of polling that gets really dirty. How can they manipulate the results and still give you real results? The gender breakdown in that poll was there were 9% more females polled than men. Now, everyone seems to agree here that basically we have a gender divided country here. Women are voting for Harris and men are voting for Trump. That seems to be the thing. So if you want to skew your poll, that's a damn well good way to do it. 9% they polled 9% more women than men. Okay, fine. So they get a result that Harris is up by 5. Now, the real interesting thing, and I've talked about this in the past too, and it still seems to be continuing, all the anecdotal evidence I and almost anyone else I talked to on this program sees, it appears that Trump is ahead. That's anecdotal evidence. I can't pin it on anything. It's not a. There's no statistics. Nothing. It's just like the amount of number of crowds he's drawing. Excuse me. God, hold on. The people who've done the man on the street things. I mean, CNN sent reported into three large restaurants in Las Vegas, and to her absolute horror, she could only find 3 Harris supporters, and that's not the only time that's happened. I mean, there's all sorts of news outlets that send people on the street, and almost everyone they run into says they're going to vote for Trump. So it's going to be really interesting what happens here. I think they're skewing the polls on purpose. Also, the other thing I want to tell you too is the only 2 polls I've ever read, the 2 that I consider the most accurate are Rasmussen and Trafalgar. And they were the only 2 polls other than 538, which literally came in under the gun. And the only 2 polls in 2016 that actually predicted that Trump was going to win. And ever since then, I thought I have considered those 2 polls to be the most accurate of all of them. I'll just get as an aside, what happened with 538 is that Nate Silver, he predicted Trump was going to win, but not until the night before the election. So so it was, and okay, God bless him, he did. People says he didn't, and that's because it happened so unbelievably late. He was tracking all this, and he saw that Clinton's lead narrowed and narrowed and narrowed and narrowed until the night before the election. Trump overtook her. That's what it is. But most people didn't notice that, so they think that 538. Then that's Nate Silver predicted Clinton was going to win. That actually isn't true. He didn't. But other than that, Trafalgar and Rasmussen are the only 2 polls that did, and because of that, I've always considered them the most accurate. They have Trump ahead, so it's going to be really interesting. If you watch the Gutfeld show, Tyrus has said this several times and said this last night that he doesn't think this is going to be close. He thinks this is going to be a complete blowout, and it'll be done by 10 o'clock. And he's going off of anecdotal evidence too, because he talks about this. The brothers, quote unquote, the brothers are voting for Trump, and he knows this, and they are. So there's no doubt about that too. So it's going to be it's going to be really interesting. I have predicted, and I'm sticking with my prediction, that Trump will win the election, even though he may not win the popular vote, because right now even the polls that say Harris is ahead have Trump winning in the battleground states, and really that's the only thing that matters. I'm sitting here in Minneapolis. Minnesota is one of the most liberal states in the union. Actually, that's not true. No, let me rephrase that. Minneapolis is one of the most liberal cities in the union. We have a really interesting thing going on here in Minnesota, and that is we have what's called outstate. There's 5 million people in the state. 3.5 million of them live in the Twin Cities metro. So, and it's a fairly, it's an area. It's a fairly large state. So you have a very large uh, rural area with a rural population. The rural population in America is going more and more red all the time. I mean, and it's like Trump's mentioned this several times that he only lost to Hillary in 2016 here by 1%. So now I've assumed that because Tim Walz is on the ticket, our governor, that they've given up on Minnesota, but apparently the polling here in Minnesota says it's pretty damn close. It's so I don't know if the Trump campaign have thrown in the towel here or not. I really don't know. But this is going to be interesting. I doubt very much they will in Minnesota. I really do. But and that's the other thing. So most of the states we know how they're going to go. There's only like 6 or 7 states, a handful of them that are really a toss up and that are up for grabs. And in all those states, Trump is ahead. He even included the leftist polling even says that. So I think there's a very good possibility that Trump will win the electoral count, even if he does not win the actual popular vote. MSNBC came to the same conclusion a few days ago, which scared the crap out of them But as a matter of fact, they had their according to their calculations, Trump's going to win the electoral count handily. So it's gonna be really interesting. It is gonna be very interesting. If you're just interested in just like freaking everything like I am. Now, the one thing that's really happening here, uh, consumer price index or confidence index came out yesterday. It's really low. It hit I think what was it, a 30-year low or something like that, very unexpectedly. The people who did this, who do this, survey, this numbering, they were not expecting this. On the other hand, and God bless them, I don't know how this is happening. Kamala's, ratings on the economy among Democrats anyway are going up. Don't know why, hasn't done anything, won't answer a question, you know? This is really interesting. I mean, they're they're honestly think they can get by on what they call vibes, and so far it is actually working. I mean, what happened in this economic polling is that it appears that Kamala's, um, numbers on the economy or her perceptions of it are going up and Trump's are staying the same. So in other words, she's not grabbing Republicans, she's grabbing independents, and that has scared a lot of Republican people, a lot of the people on the Republican side. But and also the oil and gas industry, they're scared out of their minds. They, they think that if Kamala wins, I'm paraphrasing here, and of course summarizing, but they think if Kamala wins, basically the oil and gas industry in America is over. That's what they think. They think that she will do everything in her power to shut it down, and of course that will immediately raise energy prices for Americans. And this is the part that I don't understand. It's like, well, the Democratic Party, and they even kind of admit this, is, they're not catering to what many people call low information voters. They're catering to what my boyfriend Bill O'Reilly calls no information voters. There's people who are going to vote who don't know anything about what's going on at all. They don't. They don't know, they don't know what caused the inflation. They don't know, they basically don't know anything. And they will vote because they find Harris attractive. And that's it. That they will vote on that alone. And so the question is, how much of the American public can you put into that silo? Almost 50%, if not more. It's really amazing. In some ways, we have two Americas. We have the people who are relatively informed, and the people that are not relatively uninformed, that are completely uninformed. And also, I need to point this out. There's a subset here too. There's people who also think they're informed but aren't. And the left is constantly pointing at the right, at Republicans about distributing misinformation, but as far as I can tell, they're the ones that are distributing most of the misinformation, and you will look at me and say, "Well, I'm biased," and I actually don't think I am, but, I can't prove that. So, um, yeah. No, so alright, so call me up here. We have numbers on the screen. I forgot to point this out too when I was talking earlier. So we're according to Talkers Magazine, this was the first talk show in America that took video phone calls. When we regroup on October 9th, we're not going to be doing that anymore. Matter of fact, I have to be honest with you, we haven't gotten a video phone call in months. Since we started with the audio phone system, the regular phone system, virtually all of our calls have come in on the telephone. So we're going to drop it all together, which is kind of unfortunate. It was an experiment, and essentially it didn't work. And as far as I can tell, the reason it didn't work, well, a couple of reasons. First of all, people aren't used to doing that, even though I'm constantly harping about the fact it's extremely simple, and it is. Matter of fact, if you want to, so we got 3 shows left here under this old format. If you want to give it a shot, please do. You can go to jimandnight.com/call. That's our website. There's a page there called Call. It's actually on the menu. It's Call In, and there's a big blue button on the top of the screen machine. On top of the screen, you push the button, and you will get a preview screen to check your camera and mic, and then you push the join button at the bottom, and you're in the queue. It's really simple. But as far as I can tell, the other reason people don't want to do it is there's people who don't want their face on the screen. They want to call in anonymously. We have several regular callers here. A guy named Think. He calls in regularly. That is obviously not his real name. So I don't know what his real name is, and I think that's what he wants. So he doesn't have to put his picture on the phone on the screen either. He calls in on the phone, and that seems to be what's going on here. So we're going to be taking on October 9th when we come back. We're going to be taking only audio phone calls, and at some point the audio phone number will change. Still going to be 563-999-3435 for the time being, but we're going to change to a different system at some point because this system has been kind of unreliable. So anyway, yeah. So please give me a call if you can, if you want. So I was talking about the fact that the oil and gas industry are just scared crapless of a Harris win. Now, there's something else here, and sounds like I'm kind of changing the subject, but I'm not. So this is really amazing. It shows you how much money these major corporations have. Microsoft is buying. They are buying outright. They're buying the whole thing. The former 3 Mile Island nuclear facility, nuclear plant, nuclear generating plant. They're buying it and they're going to restart it. So you're wondering, well, how come, I don't know who ran it as a public utility before, but they didn't restart it. The meltdown that happened there, what was it, 1979? It was about 50 years ago. The meltdown that happened in that facility happened in only one of the two reactors. They shut the other reactor down, even though it was in perfect working order. And apparently, Microsoft is not going to try to start the damaged reactor. They're only going to start the one that's unharmed. But the reason they're doing this, and this is very, very, very important. You're talking about energy in the United States. They're doing this because they need more electricity to power their AI. And I think I brought this up in the past that AI, first of all, the web alone burns up a massive amount of electricity. Facebook, Twitter, all these companies have these massive data centers all over the world. And in many instances, they built them next to rivers because they use the river water as a coolant because these places burn an unbelievable amount of electricity. Unbelievable. I mean, I don't know how. Okay, so I think the statistic is the last time I heard 300 minutes of video is loaded up to YouTube every minute. In other words, 300 minutes is uploaded every minute. Now, and the other thing I wonder is, how do they store all this stuff? I mean, what do they? I mean, if there's, they're honest, must have a team that runs around all the data centers that literally just installs hard drives 40 hours a week. That's all they do. They put in new hard drives. Because right now, if I'm right, Google has finally said they are going to start culling the oldest pictures that they have in Google Photos. They're going to start deleting them. They're the first ones that are going to do this. But yeah, you can't store this stuff forever. My God, well, actually, you could. I'll get to that in a second. We'll see. I mean, how things go here. But so that burns up just regular social networking. The amount of money that Facebook burns up to store your damn vacation photos is mind-boggling. So, and then you add on top of that, running AI takes at least twice as much, and in some instances, 5 times more electricity than this what's now a normal function. Now, like I said, Google has started. They're going to start deleting photos. Finally, they're the first people going to do that. But the other thing that's going to happen is that we're already into quantum computing, which is just god awful. A tangled web of complication. I don't know where to begin to explain this to you how quantum computing works. It works off of something called qubits, which are quantum bits, and quantum bits are unlike digital bits that we use currently, which are basically either 1 or 0. They're on-off switches. And then inside your computer or tablet, there's a CPU in there that has, at this point, billions of silicon transistors, and those transistors are all 1 and 0 switches. Okay, so that's how that works. That's how it works currently. It's very, very. it's a very, very advanced version of a very relatively simple concept. You get one off and on. Well, now qubits don't do that. Qubits can exist in several different states simultaneously. In other words, they can be an on, off, or halfway, or three-quarters of the way, or two-thirds of the way, and they can do that, and because of that, they can store much, much more information in the same amount of physical space than a regular, like even a solid state hard drive. There's the last thing I heard is that a quantum hard drive will be able to store all of the digital information on the entire Earth in something the size of a sugar cube. It's mind-boggling. And quantum computing, we're not going to have quantum computing on your desktop anytime soon, not just because it's really complicated and right now. You need to run these systems at almost zero, absolute zero temperature. It's absurd. I mean, with how hard this is unbelievable. But it isn't really necessary for your computing. For you to put your pictures on Facebook, we don't really need this. It's overkill. But if you're trying to figure out, crack really, really difficult mathematical problems, this is what you want. Also, the other thing is, I mean, you probably see these estimates of how long it would take your desktop computer to crack like a 22 length character password, and it was something like 120 years or something like that. Well, your quantum computer will be able to do that in a couple seconds, and that's people are actually worried about that because the thing is, if you have access to this, you literally could crack any password anywhere. It'd be child's play. So, but anyway, that's the reason Microsoft bought the Three Mile Island nuclear plant, and they're going to restart it to run their AI. And this is only going to be the beginning, folks. I know. Facebook's been looking all over the world for ways to generate more electricity, and it's pretty obvious now. Nuclear power is going to come back because of the demand. There's no, it never turns off. It's not like solar or wind, or it's not messy. It's really, really efficient. We have learned in the last 50 years, basically, we've gotten all the problems out of it. Actually, I have to give them the credit. The French have gotten most of the problems out of it because they still power the majority of electricity in France still comes from nuclear. And in the process of doing that, they have basically figured out all the problems. They figured out problems with storage. They've figured out, there's not going to be a meltdown anymore. I mean, the plant might fail. The plant might even blow up. But no, it's not gonna you're not gonna have a meltdown. You're not. So we got all this stuff figured out now, and there's gonna be and finally, God, they're so stupid, but it's like they're finally wrapping their mind around. Even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has said that the green movement has to embrace nuclear power, and yeah, damn they do, because it's the most obvious thing. I mean, is you want pollutionless, clean energy? Well, there you go. Now, 50 years from now, we're going to have nuclear fusion. The current plants run off nuclear fission, which is once again, it's a highly complicated, advanced version of a relatively simple concept, and that is you split atoms, and by splitting the atoms, you release energy. Right? That's how they work. Well, fusion works the opposite way. It takes atoms and forces them together into other molecules, and by doing that, it releases energy. It's much, much harder. But the downside is you can run the thing off water. There's no fuel requirement. Literally any matter will work. As a matter of fact, water actually, because it's relatively simple, H2O actually works out quite well. So they'll probably run off water. So in other words, you have an endless supply of fuel. You never have to worry about it. You don't have to mine uranium, or some crazy, rare earth element or anything like that. But the problem with fusion is that basically you're creating an artificial sun on Earth. So these things run so hot, you can't actually let them they can't touch the floor. So the entire reaction is suspended in a force field. I was going to say if the force field fails, everyone in the plant is screwed, but actually that's not true. If the force field fails, though, the reaction will instantly turn off. So that's not actually true. It's just you don't have any power anymore. And they've been saying for years now, I mean, the way I understand it, realistically, we're probably 50 years away from commercializing this. I won't see it, and many of you won't either. But it's going to happen eventually. And that this will make uh, power basically free. Because like I said, you can use anything. You can use dirt for fuel, but water is not only highly plentiful, like seawater, but it's actually one of the because it's so simple, relatively chemically. It's actually one of the best things you could use. So you have no fuel requirements anymore, and the things that will just run and run and run, and you'll have power. And we're getting to the point. I mean, as a conservative, people don't want me talking about this, but I'm going to talk about it. we we're getting to a point where it will be efficient for the world to run under socialism, but that won't happen for another like 300 years because our current macroeconomic model of capitalism is based on on relative scarcity. But what happens if nothing's scarce? Here's a case in point. All right, so all of a sudden, 50 years from now, we have basically limitless free power. I don't know when this is going to happen. Maybe 200 years from now. I don't know. We're going to have that replicator thing they had in Star Trek, where John Luke Picard, Captain Picard says, Earl Grey tea hot to the microwave, and the microwave just creates a cup of tea. That's going to happen. It's basically an atomic printer. We already have 3D printers, and people don't realize how much 3D printers are used. General Electric makes the entirety of their jet engines for commercial aircraft with a giant, enormous 3D printer. The whole engine is 3D printed. People don't know this, but yeah. So this we can do that. So what happens when you do it on the atomic level? Now, somebody brought up the fact I remember reading about that very same example about Earl Grey tea hot from Star Trek. That the problem First of all, the one problem with that whole scenario is that just the pattern to make the cup and the tea is like quintillion bytes of data. It's unbelievable by our current standards, and it's a massive amount of data. And where would you store it? And that's just a tiny little teacup. What if you're talking about like teddy bears or a car? Because my prediction is that you'll have like they did in Star Trek you'll have these things about the size of a microwave oven in your house, and you'll be able to make food and basically anything you want. Just tell it what you want and it will generate it. If you want something large like a car or a boat, you probably go down to the civic center, and the city probably has a large one, and you put in your order. But the thing is, this stuff doesn't cost anything. All it costs is electricity. And if your electricity is free, well, God, then everything's free, right? So if everything's free, aren't you then basically like running on socialism? I mean, that's my point. It doesn't work now. I mean, I'm staunchly against socialism under the current circumstances. 200 years from now, I don't know. It might not be a bad idea. We'll see. Oh, but getting back to the thing about the pattern generated for the cup and the tea. But it gets back to what I was talking about earlier, and I'm doing a callback here, even though I didn't plan this. Uh, that if you have a quantum hard drive, you can store all that stuff easily. It's like you can store it. You can store the pattern for an automobile easily in that tiny little sugar cube of a hard drive. It's like it wouldn't be a problem. And I think this is where we're headed. That's what's going to happen. So I read an interesting. I'm getting totally off track here, but I read a really interesting article in Popular Mechanics over the weekend about the fact that um, the article is about the nature of consciousness, and it's talking about whether there's people have different varying ideas about this. There's some people are now starting to think that consciousness is not located inside your brain, that your brain is actually like a receiver, and you receive a signal of consciousness from the universe. And there's a lot of people who are buying this. I gotta admit, I kind of am too. It makes a lot of sense. So it's like a television set, you know, that your television set may fail. You may throw a shoot at it at the screen and bust it, but the signal is still there. It's just that you can't receive it anymore. And there's a lot of people starting to think the same thing about human consciousness. If you die, well, your receiver's broken, but the signal's still that's still there. It's just that your body can't get it anymore, and therefore your body's useless. And so we might as well put you in the crematorium. I'm making fun of your death. I'm making fun of my death. Who am I kidding? You know? But there's a lot of all these ideas floating around right now, and a lot of people think that maybe. The other thing I read, and this was actually going to be my point. I'm sorry, I got off the track, and that is about the fact about interdimensionality. So, and I've talked about this before. We live in a three-dimensional universe. Let's take space and time out of it for right now. We have height, width, depth. That's what we got. We have three directions, right? Everything's measured like that. So the latest iteration of string theory in physics says there's actually 11 dimensions, but we can only perceive three. And the things we're never going to perceive more than that. It's a hardwired human thing. We can't perceive more than three direct dimensions. Like for example, there's computer programs that can render four dimensions and can display them on a two-dimensional screen about what they look like. But still, you couldn't uh, perceive it. There's also people have described there have been very fairly good descriptions of what would happen if a 4D object tried to enter our 3D universe, what it would look like. And it would basically look like a pattern that's kind of a, how do I put this? Flailing in and out kind of, you know, I'm not doing a good job of explaining this here, which is a very problem. It's very difficult to even explain, and we can't perceive it anyway. But they were talking about the fact that there's a good possibility that some of these extraterrestrials who are flying here, they either live in a different dimension or they have mastered how to switch back and forth between them, and that's probably true, which is the reason they kind of have a tendency to appear and disappear. Uh, both the craft and the creatures, and that's probably going to happen to us too. We're probably going to figure that out. I mean, we're just talking about it now. You know, so what in 100 years? I don't know. Is that even? Look what we just did in the last 150 years. We went from no electricity to the smartphone in your pocket in 150 years. I told you about this last week or the week before. A couple weeks ago, I went to Niagara Falls, and I went alone because I'm a nerd and nobody else in my party wanted to. I went to the old power plant ruins on the Canadian side of the falls, which is now a museum. So they opened up the world's largest hydroelectric plant in at Niagara Falls in 1905. This plant was so old that Tesla actually helped design it personally. He actually worked on it. So, what's the deal? The deal is you got falling water that never stops ever, constantly, a lot of it, and so you harness it so you drive turbines, and the turbines are connected to electrical generators, and they generate electricity. And that plant, that plant ran until 2006, believe it or not, in the same with the same old ancient equipment. The reason they never updated it is because it was putting out 25 hertz electricity. The modern standard's 60, but there was one customer they had, a large customer in Ontario that was a manufacturing plant that was still using a 25 hertz equipment. And so that was their customer, and that's where they fed the electricity to. So when that company went out of business or switched over to 60 hertz, I can't remember what it was. There was no use for it and it shut down. So it ran for 101 years. And that's unbelievable. And then you look at all the crap that went through just to generate electricity. I mean, it's so primitive, falling water, turbines, it was a large amount of mechanical equipment, a very large amount of it. And you can walk through this place and they have 11 electrical generators there. Of course, they're all mute now, but the stuff, humans, we figure shit out. That's what we do. But Prior to 1870, we had no electricity on the planet, basically. And now, like I said, 150 years later, you have a cell phone in your pocket that's way more powerful than the entire computing power that the Department of Defense had only 30 years ago. I mean, your cell phone is way more powerful than all of the computers that DoD had in 1990 combined. It's really amazing. So yeah, so you think we won't be able to do this? No, we're going to do that. We're going to do all this crap, but I won't live to see it, and you probably won't either. So yeah, but from an economic level, what happens when scarcity is not an issue anymore? When you can print an automobile the same way you can copy a song off of Spotify, that what does that cost you? 1/100th of a cent, you know, less than that, and it's a perfect copy every time. You get a perfect copy. What if you could do that with physical items? Well, then there's and also then no one would be a want. There'd be no want for anyone. We could, if you had one of those little microwave machines, you could generate food to your heart's content. Yeah, I don't know. We gotta love. It's an interesting time, folks. And there's something else I want to address here before we leave too. If you watch this program with any regularity, and I know people think I'm nuts about this, and I don't care because the thing is, the scientific proof is with me about climate change. I've said climate change is bullshit. Now, what I mean by that, I have to, that's the short answer. Here's the longer answer. Global warming is real. The world's been warming up for 300 years, constantly for the last 300 years. But the question becomes, are humans contributing to that? And the answer is, if you look at all the scientific data, which I have, I've spent a lot of time studying this, and a lot of the people who talk about it don't know shit. But basically the scientific data says no, not really. We might be contributing it to a little bit, but not. It's certainly not a major factor. And the other signal, there's a smoking gun proof to this. And there's, like I said, the world's been warming up for 300 years. Uh, the first half of those 300 years, there was no industrialization on the planet. World warmed up anyway. So I had Patrick Moore, the famed climatologist, who's one of the primary instigators of this uh, anti-trend, if you want to call it that. Uh, yeah, I've had him on the show. It's the single most watched episode ever that we did. And he wrote a book called, oh God, it has a weird title. It's called Catastrophic Truths or something like that, uh, about climate change. And the part of, not all of it, the majority of the books on climate change is about 150 pages. I can't say it's dense reading, and I complimented him on this about the fact that he made it as simple as you can make it. That said, it's not a simple subject. The book is filled with charts and graphs. There are no mathematical formulas, but there's a lot of charts and graphs. It takes a little while I think you could probably plow through it. You probably doesn't interest you. So I'm just tell you right now that no, humans are not causing climate change. It's happening, but we're not causing it. So then the question is, what do we do? And a lot of people think nothing. Well, Vivek Ramaswamy has a book out today. His book's called Truths. So I think in the book, if I'm right, the first truth he talks about is that God is real. I can prove that too. It's very simple. You're sitting here listening to me. How does that happen? I mean, I'm not, we can, talking about whether God has influenced our lives or all this sort of stuff, or whether Jesus existed, those are all different matters. But whether God is real, yeah, no, I just proved it. All right. Second thing, he says climate change is a hoax, and it is. Right now, it's a politicized scientific movement, basically to grift money off Americans or the world. About 2 weeks after I had Patrick Moore on the show, the UN, oh, Jesus, they put up a thing on their website that says we can solve climate change on Earth for only $75 trillion. Yeah, yeah, right, sure. All you need to do is give us $75 trillion and we can solve it. Yeah, like they've solved everything else. Yeah, and like that isn't just a little chunk of change, you know? It's like so Murray Sabrin, the economist, was on the show last Thursday, and I had him on specifically because 2 Thursdays before that, the interest on the national debt of the United States hit $1 trillion a year. That's the interest, not the debt, the interest. The debt is $37 trillion. The interest hit $1 trillion a year, our interest payment, which means we're paying about, what is it, $100 billion a month, more or less, something like that. Like, so, uh, all right, why? All right, I gotta. Oh, I'm talking about Vivek Ramaswamy. So yeah. So the second thing on his book is that climate change is a hoax, and he disagrees with me on the one thing. He says no, humans are causing climate change, or at least contributing greatly to it. He thinks that. I don't. I think there's plenty of evidence to indicate that's not true. But that's not really the point. The point is he brings up something that Patrick Moore has brought up, and a lot of these other climatologists brought up too, and that is in total, the rising temperature of the Earth is probably a net positive. He talks about the fact that like eight times more people die of cold on the Earth than warmth, and that's true. But also the fact that it will probably make more land tillable and allow more uh, plants to grow. He also talks about the fact that I've talked about the fact that everyone talks about carbon dioxide like it's some evil, and not only is carbon dioxide uh, not not evil at all, not only is it a totally necessary, beneficial thing to life on Earth, but he also brought this up as Patrick Moore did. We're at an almost all-time low on the planet for the amount of carbon dioxide we have right now. We're at 400 parts per million. If we get to 150 parts per million, everything on Earth dies. So it's and so we have a bunch of people who are treating carbon dioxide as basically as a pollutant, and it's completely the opposite. It's totally the opposite. So and Ramaswamy's right. By raising the temperature of the Earth in the long run, it's probably a positive, not a negative. Now, granted, it does screw things up. If you live in Phoenix, you might not be able to live there anymore. It might become intolerable. You know, stuff like that. But or I've said this, but this is probably the perfect analogy or example of this, and that is Battery Park in New York City probably be underwater, and that might be true too. But still, uh, like I said, it'd probably be a net positive, and he talks about the same thing. I just think this has to be addressed because I look at the climate change hoax is the biggest single grift put upon the American public, actually the world public ever. This is simply a idea, a plan to get money out of you. That's all it is. Because the thing is, first of all right, if we're going to go into the assumption that climate change is natural, what would we do about it? And secondly, do we want to do anything about it? Is regardless of what people say, it's not caused by the pollution our cars are putting in the air. Now, that said, that's the other thing too. This gets really complicated because nobody likes pollution, and that's true. We don't. I don't want pollution. I think this thing about cars. Well, first of all, we don't have the electricity to actually go all electric cars in this country right now. We don't. I mean, you can talk to blue in the face. We do not have the electric grid infrastructure to handle this. It's not going to be That's not going to be true for many many years. So that said, yeah, I like the idea that my cars are producing less and less pollution. I think that's a good idea. I like the idea. I like clean air. You know, but no, is whether that pollution is contributing to climate change? No, it's not. So, and I had lunch with a friend of mine recently, and we were talking about this. I told her, I said, I know you've probably heard this. She's a good liberal woman. I said, the whole climate change thing is a hoax. And she just looked at me and there's a long pause. And she said, well, that's not what I've heard. And I said to her, I said, I know that. That is not what you've heard. I know. And of course, that I look crazy. And I don't care. I don't care if I look crazy. I don't. They're not getting money out of me for climate change. It's just another way to scare us into giving more revenue to the government. That's all it is. So I'm going to leave you folks here tonight with a couple of things of part three. This is a part of the show where we talk about stuff like other than the news. Coca-Cola has discontinued spiced Coke after only about 6 months. They started in February. I've never had it. I don't have an interest in having it. I'm a real Coke aficionado. Now, my family in 1931 ran a restaurant. 1931. I wasn't born, but still shows you how old I am. In 1931 was the restaurant my family ran was one of the very first restaurants in America to get a Coke fountain machine, which Coca-Cola invented because they were tired at that point. Soda jerks were mixing Coke per glass, and what you got depending on who the soda jerk was who was mixing it. It was not. They did this to standardize. They wanted every glass of Coke to taste the same, and who can blame them? So they invented the fountain machine that mixed the carbon dioxide, the bubbles, and the syrup and the sugar and the water all together in perfectly proportion. And my family was one of the very first restaurants in America to get one of those things because they were such good customers. And people don't know this; they gave them away. The Coca-Cola company gave away fountain machines to restaurants and soda fountains because they just wanted them to use them. So anyway, so I'm a huge Coke fan, and I have the only real thing I've ever collected is Coke memorabilia, and I know that, but yeah, I'm a, so between that and the power plant story, the power ruins, it's like, yeah, Jesus, what a nerd. Yeah, okay, I am, but I didn't ever try the spiced Coke. I just wasn't interested. The other thing is, if you get a chance sometime, now the formula to Coke is still secret, but most of it has been figured out. Most of it, not all of it, most of it is figured out. It's extremely complicated. And this guy named John Pemberton, what was it, 1895 or something like that, when he invented Coke, it's ridiculously, there's like orange rinds in there, and it's unbelievably complicated. Whereas Pepsi is basically sugar water. It's basically water with a bunch of sugar in it. That's what it is. So Coke is kind of like alcohol in its complexity. So anyway, I never tried the Spice Coke. I just wasn't interested, but apparently nobody else did either because they killed it after 6 months. It was the first uh, sugared Coke plant product they had released since I think New Coke in '87 or something like that, which of course was a ridiculous failure. And what were they thinking? Really, they said, well, let's. And I don't know if you know this. If you remember, in 1987, the day they released New Coke, Pepsi, the entire Pepsi Corporation, they took the day off because they figured, well, we won, and they did. It was like basically it was that they were bowing to Coke. The formula for New Coke was basically sugar water, you know, and they got so many complaints because the thing is, I know maybe I'm weird. I know about this. I drink, most people drink coffee in the morning. I will often have a glass of Coke, either real Coke or Diet Coke. I'm a huge fan of Diet Coke. I mean, I love the taste of it, and I'm really glad they didn't try to make it taste like regular Coke. It's a completely different product. Probably should have had a different name. You know, I'll have that to drink in the morning because that bitter taste really wakes me up, and I know that's what a lot of people like about coffee. My wife is a huge coffee aficionado. I mean, my God, we burn through Keurig machines here constantly. And I mean, some people drink wine. She drinks coffee. And okay, so I know I appreciate her appreciation of it, just not for me. And I don't know if that's because I didn't grow up with it or whatever the reason, and because my family ran restaurants, so I grew up with Coke. But I never tried the spice Coke, but it's gone. There you go. Now, some guy, and if I'm right, this is in Switzerland, if I'm right, this is not in the United States. Um, he died because he was trying to separate some frozen hamburger patties, like with a knife, and accidentally stabbed himself with a knife with the chest and killed himself. I shouldn't laugh. It's not funny because I've done this. I've not done that thing. I constantly thinking when I'm trying to separate these frozen patties. It's occurred to me that I could kill myself. That's occurred to me many times. Really easy here. I could do that, and well, he did. God bless him. Oh man. And finally, There's going to be, and I can't remember when this is going to happen. Let me actually look here. Starting on September 29th, we are going to have an asteroid is going to come into Earth's orbit temporarily for about a month. We're gonna have a little mini moon. And how big is it again? It's 33 meters long. It's leaving Earth orbit on November 5th. So the article that was a Popular Mechanics I'm reading. The article, excuse me, talks about the fact that at some point, and this is probably true. I'm not probably. It's once again something that's going to happen. Uh, these asteroids will be mined. We will end up sending probably automated crews, probably not real people, out to these asteroids because you have to understand they're so small they have virtually no gravitational field. So it's basically like you're out in space. You have to attach yourself to it, and they will mine these things for rare, what we call rare earth elements. They won't be on Earth, but they're probably rare elements that you can't find anywhere else. There's huge need for this stuff. I mean, one here is lithium. You know how much lithium we're burning through? Lithium and cobalt just to make electric cars. I mean, my God, it's unbelievable. And these things are rare. These are not, which is one of the reasons your electric car costs so much. And it's uh, not for the faint of heart. So if you got some asteroid that comes by, or even doesn't come by, I mean, there's the asteroid belt, which is between Mars and Saturn, if I'm right. You know, you just send a bunch of automated crews out there, and they attach themselves to a bunch of rocks, and next thing you know, you're sending rocks back to Earth. There you go. We got it all figured out. We got it going on, folks. That's what That's my new catchphrase, and my wife says, "Okay, boomer." So I want to thank you, folks, for listening tonight. And we got a I'm taking we're off tomorrow. My wife had surgery this last weekend, a few days ago, and I have to attend to her with something regarding that. So we're off tomorrow. Thursday, I might try to get one of the usual suspects to come on with me, and you know who those people are. We got maybe about a dozen regular people here that come on once every 4 or 6 weeks. I'm going to see if I can get one of those to come on. Then we're back on Monday. That'll be a solo show, as most of our Monday shows are. On Tuesday, we're gonna have the month review panel is going to review the vice presidential debate. We'll be starting right after the debate, which should be about 10:30 Eastern time. In other words, we'll be starting about a half an hour earlier than we usually start. And then we're off for a whole week. And when we come back, the show is going to look much different, much different. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope you are too. I want to thank you folks for watching and listening. Really, much appreciated. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie. And good night to you, wherever you are. Well, we're off tomorrow night. We'll see you on Thursday night. Take care, everyone.